Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to week 9 of urban management, where we will have our final 2 case study introduction sessions. I see Fico is here already. However, I think we're still waiting. We're still waiting for. I think it's Nessa, who still has to present her case study introduction on urbanization. So anyways, I think without further ado, since Pico is here already, I would like to invite you to start sharing your presentation with us. I'll stop sharing my screen for now. I will reshare this this QR code to you with you near the end of the session, so that those of you who are late to join can mark your attendance. So there you go. Oh, good. Nessa is here. So all the presenters are here, but Fico, you may go first.
I'm sorry, sir. Give me a little bit of a moment. I think I have a little bit of problem on sharing my screen.
No worries. I'll double check if I've enabled screen sharing. I'm just confirming that I have enabled screen sharing.
No, I think it's my browser that keeps making errors. I actually can share my screen, but the thing is, it won't let me open up my presentation. Can you actually see my screen in the current state? I think I've fixed
Yep, I can see your screen.
problem. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is actually having a great day. It's been a busy day for me. Like a couple of days ago, I think that my heart stopped like yesterday, but then I recovered myself from puasa, which is a thankful day because I actually feel like having like a puasa day. So regarding to my topic in urban management class. So I've been assigned to get the urban disasters. So I decided to pick the village of Melayu, or you can tell it's Kampung Melayu. So before that, my name is Bikorang Wibisono with the honor P082 with the backup 003. So I'm going to expound every kind of urban disaster and why I decided to pick the Malayu village itself. And so before we start on let's talk a little about what the meaning of disaster itself. So I think everybody would know the meaning of disaster, or what it does to urban planning in every area, including Indonesia. So disaster is actually a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or a society at any scale due to hazardous events interacting with conditions of exposure, which it can affect on the vulnerability, the capacity, the leading to one or more of the following, which is human, material, or maybe the economic, environmental losses and impacts throughout the urban area. So technically, disaster could create an effect to several urban areas by damaging their conditions, their structures, their facility, or maybe their utility, or maybe the infrastructure. or it can countermeasures the new types of damage depending on the situations. So we could also see different kinds of examples right in the picture below. You could see it has different kinds of major impacts, or what kind of damages that could happen. I don't, in this one, I don't really think it could happen this way, but sometimes if you go to the other countries, they have faced a lot of disasters such as hurricanes or maybe tornadoes or tsunami, depending on the current state that they're having in their area. And so we're moving to urban disasters. So urban disasters are basically incidents that can cause corruption of normal life, deviation from ordinary expectations of individual or maybe groups. These causes could be divided into two specimens, which is natural disasters and also human-induced disasters. So I think for natural disasters, everybody would know what kind of natural disaster that could happen in any area, such as if we living in Indonesia, it could actually have an earthquake or maybe floods, or maybe volcanoes that are active right in Java or maybe mid-Java. But on the other hand, which is on the human-induced disasters, human-induced disasters are like the events such as fires or maybe explosion, mine accidents, or maybe detonations. It could be potentially be a pollution, for example, land pollution or maybe air pollution that could happen in any area, such as in Indonesia too. It could also be occurred in traffic accidents. It could also happen of radioactive pollutions. Most other countries uses nuclear as the main power source, that it could actually create another potential or maybe a bad potential to create radioactive pollutions right in the area. And human-induced disasters could also be caused from wars or maybe battles. So if you know the current news from Ukraine, Ukraine are having a little bit of trouble on managing wars, and they're having a lot of damage on their urban areas due to the conflict itself. And so here the implication of the location that I have decided to pick. Technically, before that, I was trying to pick Maryland, which is one of my first choice, but then I realized that Maryland are having a rare identity of getting natural disasters. It seems that they initially found a new problem of natural disaster in the 2021 and 2022. So I think it's better for me to decide the Malayu village itself, because it keeps happening and each year on the disaster itself. So a little bit of information of the Kampung Melayu itself. So it is located in the eastern Jakarta, which is the city in Jatinegara, which is close by to my home. So it also formed in the collection of Malay ethnic people who are imported by the Dutch in the early days of colonialism. So basically, these are the historical identity of Indonesia, which is in Kampung Melayu. So the other facts that I have found in Kampung Melayu is that people who live there were also mixed with, where there are like Malays, Bandanese, and also Chinese. Here are the conditions of the Malayu village in Jakarta. So Kampung Melayu is the village in the Jatinegara sub-district, which I told you about earlier. It's located in East Jakarta. The village has an area for about 47.883 HA, which is a little bit big. But the sub-district consists of about 114 Rukun neighbors and also 8 Rukun Warga. So the village area has a lot of characteristic, and also it has a little bit of factors in it, which has Kebon Manggis village, railway, or maybe Jalan Ciliwung River, Bukit Duri village in the west, and others. So if you talk about the culture in Malayu village, the people in Malayu come from the north of the Malacca Strait, which is in the North Sumatra Island, Singapore, Malaysia, and the other surrounding areas. So basically, they are mixed sometimes, and I think it's because of the around 1014th century, which is the early days of colonialism. So they have been actively trading with the Portuguese, Dutch, English, and also Chinese since around 1400 early days of colonialism. But for now, if you want to talk about the economy in this current state, which is right now, I think most of the condition of the economy in Kampung Melayu seems to be low, meaning that most of the trading services or maybe trading communities are getting low benefit because of the COVID pandemic. So this scene of event happens due to pandemic situations. Their business, especially transportation services, started to decline. However, the trade and services are still available and have a constant pace to do business. Although they don't create a lot of businesses, but at the very least, they have created a little bit of money through the economy that they made. So I have some evidence that can be that can support the economy of their transport businesses. As you can see on the news on the bottom right, bottom left. So you can actually see the news based on the angkot. So angkot is basically one of the unique transport that they have in Indonesia. They have their own way of getting businesses, to keep their pace going. But although most of the other angkot doesn't have as much passengers due to COVID pandemic. And you can see there are a couple of tables that are available right in the presentation. You can see that most of the programs of their public transport in Malayu village are completely inactive, or maybe it's not available anymore because of the situation that has been going on in the current state. So here are the actual issues that they're actually having a couple of months ago. I think it's supposed to be 5 or maybe 6 months ago, but this issue is a little bit risky, and it might create a lot of challenges for people to live there. So the issue that occurred in Kampung Melayu, or the Malayu village, is indicated as the natural disaster due to flooding. So it's not only a temporary flooding, because the flooding is it reached almost 1 or maybe 2 meters in depth, meaning that it create a lot of impact on the people's property, and it might create a damage for or maybe a risk for young kids to have forced to swim. Okay, yes, the natural disaster in Malayu village was the flooding, and most of the floodings in there are completely critical. Most of the citizens that lived in there has to stay in the second level because the first level has been filled with water. So here's a little bit of information of the flooding in the Malayu village. So the residents of Kampung Melayu were submerged in a meter-high flood, which have inundated most of the residents or houses for a couple of hours, which is 8 hours. So these properties have been covered by rainwater for like a couple of hours, and most people are needed to be evacuated immediately, because if these scene of scenario keeps happening on them, they might have a little bit of difficult time to them to manage. And as you can see that from the evidence or the pictures that can be seen in the presentation, the event damages of the most urban areas, such as the facilities, the utilities, including their properties, most of them are completely drowned with the water, because it's the water is like 100 centimeter above. So I have another research on why is it still flooding, why is Jakarta still flooding in the era of 2021 and 2022. I have a couple of evidence, or maybe a couple of information that can be found in the internet, which is one of them is that the flood was not only caused by high rainfall intensity, but it also has the lack of capacity of the dam, meaning that the drainage or maybe the dam could not handle as much water that they could get from the high intensity of rainfall. And also ever since that the dam has overflowed with all of those water that has been created in the area, it actually overflowed for too much in the Melayu village, and it creates for about 1 meter or maybe 2 meters of depth of the flood itself, which is, I think it's critical for us to heard that, because it might endangers for kids that can't swim in the village itself. So here are the programs that they have implemented earlier. So a couple months ago, they had a plan to build a couple of houses in Kampung Melayu that has, criticized, that has a critical damage from all of these floodings. So at the end, they decided to have to add some fundings through the house so they can rehabilitate the damaged houses right in the area. Although the flood actually happens again after the rehabilitations, so they decided to implement another program, which is the warning flood sign, or maybe the preparation of the equipment. So basically, the second program that they implement is that they are trying to make sure that whenever the natural disaster, which is flood, happens in Kampung Melayu again, they have the proper equipment, or maybe the emergency equipment for them to prevent getting a low risk, a high risk. So basically, whenever the flood happens in the village, people could go to the preparation of the equipment, or maybe to the assign of the equipment, so they can get, for example, a boat or maybe a food supply for people that got impacted by the floodings in the village. Yeah, I think that's the end of my presentations. Here are some of the references that are from. So basically, I got the information from all of these references, and I used them properly and making sure that they are not they're not a hoax. So yeah, I think that's all from my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vico, for that nice description of the issue that Kampung Melayu is facing. With regards to disaster management, I have made plenty of notes. I have made plenty of notes on disaster management overall, and perhaps how to best proceed with the future strategic and action planning stages. But before I do that, I'd like to invite the other peers to perhaps share their perspectives or deliver any questions or comments that they might have. If any of you have experienced Kampung Melayu flooding before, or similar, or have been in a similar situation, it would be nice if you can share it with the class. What were the challenges of what are the challenges of living with severe floods? I know as far as my experience with flood goes, the highest or the deepest inundation that I have experienced is perhaps up to my knees, and I'm about 170 centimeters tall. My knee should be, I don't know, it's less than a meter high. So perhaps about 50 odd centimeters or so. So that's as high as that's as deep as I've ever been. And it does impede on our daily activities, especially when the water doesn't go, when the water takes time to go away. Anyone with a similar experience? I know one of my best friends. I forgot where her parents lived in Jakarta, but it was during one of those severe floods where all of their ground floor was totally inundated. So I know her parents really loved timber furniture. Those really heavy wood furniture, woodwork furnitures, and all of those heavy furnitures were just floating about. So that's a scary mental image, in my opinion. Well, perhaps while waiting for any questions or comments, it would be nice for the next phase, for you to add for you to touch on or discuss a little bit about the disaster management cycle. So the disaster management cycle differs from one scholar to another, but generally it involves the disaster itself, and then followed by a response stage, and then the recovery stage, and then the preparation stage, so to say, before returning again to the disaster. So each phase is somewhat interlinked. So during the response phase, it's the activities that take place during the response phase is, of course, emergency response, oriented on a short-term benefits, making sure everyone's okay, making sure of supplies, making sure adequate supplies of emergency rations and water, food, and then ensuring that logistical routes, or establishing logistical routes. How can they transport, and through where can they transport these emergency rations, medication, and so on, emergency personnel. So that's the response phase. Just geared or oriented towards making sure that everyone's okay. Well, or addressing the victims. Once the situation stabilizes, we enter the recovery phase. Now, recovery itself is divided into two categories. Sorry, the short-term and long-term recovery. And during this phase is actually an opportunity to either rebuild, so return things to the way they were, or build back better. Learn from the previous events, to prevent perhaps not to prevent the floods, but to prevent similar number of victims. For example, if this year's floods say impacted 100 households, it took with it, say, 50 victims, then what can we do to make sure that there will be no more victims in the next should the next flood come? So either to rebuild back to business as usual, or to build back better. And this recovery phase actually has a strong tie or strong connection with the preparation or disaster preparation phase. In the preparation phase, so anticipate for future events. There are so many ways. Or so many strategies that you can implement. So first of all, Pico mentioned in his presentation about the early warning system, or the warning system, papan pengumuman, or whatever it was. So an early warning system, a well-placed early warning system is a well-placed and functional early warning system is key to preparation, key to preparing for the impact of the disaster. And then, of course, there is a matter of developing and increasing institutional capacity. And what I mean by institutional capacity is not just the government's capacity to respond, but it's also the inhabitants, the residents' awareness, and increasing their awareness, increasing their capacity to respond, increasing their capacity to build back better, and so on. The preparation, or the anticipation, the mitigation phase also involves other structural and non-structural approaches. I think I've mentioned this before. The structural approaches would be to build dikes, build dams, and so on. And it's not always the most economic approach. The other approach would be the non-structural approach, which involves land use management and institutional capacity building, as I mentioned. So with regards to land use management, there is, of course, the issue of relocating activities, relocating settlements, perhaps, and whatnot. So with the case of places like Kampung Melayu and perhaps similar settlements, like that, say Kampung Kalijote in Central Java, it's not easy to relocate activities and or settlement. So what the best way to deal with floods in areas like that would be to create a flood map. I'm sure the flood maps have, I'm sure Kampung Melayu has flood maps. The local government would have flood maps already. Flood maps, and then identification of evacuation routes, meeting points. So determining safety areas, safety meeting points, and how best to get to that meeting point. And then, of course, the early warning system. Now, from what I learned from reading the book about the slums that the Dutch anthropologist once visited and observed in Jakarta, she mentioned something about a collaboration between the stakeholders. So the slum settlement in which she lived had appointed village representatives, so to say, that would communicate with authorities, especially those who operate the dams, the levees, yang mengoperasikan atau menjaga penjaga pintu air. They communicate with them through short wave radio transmitters or handy talkies. So they communicate with them, and the levee operator would then let them know whether, okay, the water level has reached this sort of height. I am so and so moments away from opening the levee to relieve pressure, so you guys better get ready. That sort of thing. It's a simple, relatively low technology approach to early warning systems, and on the other hand, other than its other than it being simple, it also in a way it also empowers it also empowers the inhabitants themselves, because they know when the flood is coming, they know where the flood is coming from, and therefore subsequently they have time to prepare, move belongings to higher ground, and then evacuate, that sort of thing. So once again, flood maps, evacuation routes, meeting points, and then maintaining live communication between inhabitants or representatives of the Kampung Melayu residents, who then communicates or maintains live communication with authorities involved in managing the flood infrastructure. So perhaps you can take down those notes and see if you can build on that for the next phase of this manuscript building. Once again, I invite the others to share their experience and thoughts with the class with regards to the theme or the topic that we were just discussing earlier. Otherwise, I take it that FICO has made a very clear case. Please do take my comments and notes into consideration, and you are more than welcome to deliver your closing remarks.
Yeah, I think I have taken some notes from you, sir. I think it's really beneficial, and it could actually help me a lot, such as the natural disaster cycle, the analysis, and also the recovery stage. I think that could actually see their progress on how they actually manage their evacuation, or maybe how to manage their disaster in that kind of flooding situation. Yeah, I think that's all from my presentation here. Apologies if I have some stutterings or maybe some other types of issues that when I'm talking right now, I'm actually feeling a little bit tired, but I'm actually recovered from all of those business yesterday. But that's overall. Thank you very much for everyone that listened to my presentation. Yeah, that will be all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite our final presenter for case study introductions, of course, which is Nessa. I see you here somewhere. There you are. The time and the screen is yours. Thank you. Thank you, Pico.
Hi, sir, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it clearly. Thank you.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nessa Almera, and my student number is 1. Today, I'm going to talk about the urbanization in Surabaya. So for the introduction, Surabaya is the capital city of East Java province, which is in Indonesia, as well as the largest metropolitan city in the province. Surabaya is the second largest city in Indonesia after Jakarta. Surabaya has a population of around 2,970,000 inhabitants in 2021. According to Bappenas, Surabaya is one of the main growth centers in Indonesia. Surabaya is developing as a metropolitan city, and Surabaya is growing rapidly in development. This causes many people to come to the city of Surabaya due to conveniences, and the strategic position of Surabaya as the center of community economic activity makes it always dynamic. For the administrative area of Surabaya, Surabaya is located on the north coast of the eastern part of Java Island and is opposite the Madura Strait and the Java Sea. The area of Surabaya city is bordered on the north and east by Madura Strait, while in the west it is bordered by Residency, and in the south it is bordered by Sidoarjo. The area of the 21 sub-districts and also 163 villages. So according to National Library of Medicine in 2014, urbanization refers to the population shift from rural to urban areas, the corresponding decrease in the proportion of people living in rural areas, or the gradual increase in the number of people living in urban areas, and the ways in which societies adapt to this change. It is predominantly the process by which towns and cities are formed and become larger as more people begin living and working in central areas. So here are the table of the population in Surabaya and also the charts of migration in Surabaya from 2011 until 2015. The large number of people who come is one of the causes of the city of Surabaya experiencing population growth every year, with an average population growth rate from 2010 to 2020 is actually 0.37% per year. And there are 4 components that make up population growth in the city of Surabaya. These components are births, deaths, immigration, and outmigration. Among the 4 components, the migration factor is the largest contributor to the population growth of the city of Surabaya. And also the contribution of migration factors has reached an average of more than 60% per year in development after the construction was carried out. Currently, there is PT Surabaya Industrial Estate Rungkut, or can be shortened for PT SIA, and the housing industry industrial and warehousing area. In addition to industry, over time, the economic structure of the natural resource extraction sector, industry, and services. Therefore, efforts to optimize the economy are also focused on improving services to the community, such as licensing and basic infrastructure. Real estate areas are encouraged to grow, including around the Kembang Jepun complex in the northern part of the city, while in the southern part, namely around Pidungan places. They were converted into shopping centers to support trade. Local government built in Indonesia.
Okay, it seems there's been connectivity issues.
Sorry,
Oh,
sir.
there you are.
I think I have a
That's okay.
problem, connection problem.
That's okay.
Can I continue my presentation? Can be relied on to support the development of the city of Surabaya for its goal of achieving people's welfare. Another potential that the city of Surabaya has is its attractiveness as a city of education. This is shown by various well-known
I'm
educational
sorry, but
institutions.
I don't think I'm seeing your slides at the moment.
Oh,
You might have to repeat that. You might have to share your screen once again.
okay, sorry. Can you now see my screen? In the city of Surabaya, there are 5 state universities, or can be known by PTN, namely ITS, UNER, UNESA, INSA, and UPN. And this PTN is the largest PTN, especially in Eastern Indonesia. So the various potentials of the city of Surabaya become an attraction that must be addressed likely by the city government and also the Surabaya community. Many residents who want to get a better income and work come to the city of Surabaya to try their luck. The variety of educational facilities and available job opportunities are also factors that encourage the high number of people to come to the city of Surabaya. And the rise of development in Surabaya can spur urbanization. As a result, Surabaya will become a magnet for residents to come looking for work and a place to live. However, this urbanization causes various kinds of problems if there is no control limit. And worse still, if it's not being followed at a pace commensurate with the development of industrialization. This problem may cause various problems in Surabaya. And due to the high urbanization, the challenge of Surabaya is to reduce the bad impacts and develop the good ones. And it depends on the management applied in handling it. And these impacts also have an impact on the economic, social, and environment in Indonesia, in Surabaya. Sorry. So for the economic growth, for the economic aspects, it has economic growth impacts, poverty impacts, and also unemployment impacts. Urbanization occurs for a good reason, which also has a positive impact, which is the economic growth, because this impact the existence increasing urbanization, GDP per capita will also increase. And these are the last 9 years of GDP chart. And then the third drive, they're needed in the city. However, in reality, many of them came to the city without any skills except farming. Therefore, it is difficult for them to get a decent job, and they are forced to work as laborers, night guards, housemates, petty cab driver, street vendors, and other similar jobs. And this will eventually increase the number of unemployed in the city, which causes poverty. And these are the charts of the poverty in Surabaya from the year 2013 until 2020, and then the employment rate from the year 2018 until 2020, because I can't find the 2016 2017 data in PBS Kota Surabaya. And to be able to meet their daily needs, people will be desperate, and it leads to commit crimes such as stealing, robbing, and even killing, like the number of crime charts that I put here. And also urbanization means migration to the city, which will cause increasing population density, and high population density will be followed by congestion since the city is too crowded. And the air pollution with the presence of serious pollutants beyond the threshold, the homeless will build makeshift houses and build from slums. And urban heat is a phenomenon of increasing air temperature in urban areas compared to rural areas, which caused by the population density, congestion, and also air pollution. So far from what I've read, the Surabaya city government efforts in minimizing migration so that it gives rise to urbanization are by regulating and controlling the population in the form of regulations with existing population, administration regulations, namely the SKTS, which stands for Surat Keterangan Tinggal Sementara. SKTS is a certificate issued by the implementing agency, which is responsible and authorized to carry out administration service for Indonesian citizens living temporarily in an area. The reference related to SKDS is Law Number 23 of 2006 concerning population administration, which stipulates that a person who lives more than 6 months to a year in an area outside the original domicile is required to obtain a moving certificate so that it can reduce migration more regularly and reduce the impact of population density. And then the second program is Kotaku, which stands for Kota Tanpa Kumuh. It's a program implemented by the government nationally in 269 cities or districts in 34 provinces, which becomes a platform or base for slum management that integrates various resources and funding sources, including from the central, provincial, city, district, government, private sector, community, and other stakeholders. Kotaku itself aims to build an integrated system for slum management, stakeholders in planning and implementation. Based on the mayor's decree concerning priority areas for quality improvement of housing and settlements in the city of Surabaya, the districts are designated as priority areas for improving the quality of housing settlements in the Kotaku program, and one of them is Kenjeran district. So for the last program is PKH, which stands for Program Keluarga Harapan, is a program of providing conditional social assistance to poor families who are designated as PKH beneficiary families. Through this program, poor family is encouraged to have access and utilize basic social services in health, education, food and nutrition, care, and then also assistance, including access to various other social protection programs, which are complementary programs on an ongoing basis. The criteria for PKH recipients include certain health, education, and also social welfare criteria. And these are the references that I took. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nessa. It's a common it is commonly understood that people migrate from rural areas to urban areas in seeking seeking better opportunities, better economic opportunities, seeking better facilities, or seeking better education, seeking better health care, perhaps, and simply because cities have more, or seem to have more to offer than non-urbanized areas. And it's because of that. Population growth, population growth is usually quite steady, or perhaps dramatically rapid. That it requires a certain amount of attention. Thank you for sharing the programs with us. There's not really that many things. There's not we can do there's not that many things we can do about the in-migration flow, or the in-migration traffic. I know we discussed during the consultation period about returning non-skilled labor, sending them back to the regions from whence they came. But that requires a lot of coordination on behalf of the stakeholders and on behalf of the authorities that are involved. So local government authorities in Surabaya also has to communicate with their rural counterparts. So from wherever these people seem to come from, wherever these people seem to have migrated from, that means perhaps then the Surabaya government can develop a sort of a collaborative program to prevent people from certain areas from migrating. You might think that, Surabaya's government or any big city's government should think mainly about their own people's welfare, but in a way, this is also thinking about their own citizens' welfare, because they're preventing unnecessary pressure on the city's infrastructures, and that could potentially impede the distribution of service, the distribution and access to goods and services provided by the city for its citizens. Another way of counteracting or another way of keeping urbanization or in-migration in check is to monitor monitor people's movements, especially long distance commuters. Like, well, I used to be a long distance commuter because I live outside of the city borders. Some of the staff in our department, some of the faculty in our department are long distance commuters. Our head of department, for example, Pak Cahyono, he commutes regularly from Singosari to Surabaya. And then we also have movement from within the city, which, compounded by the movement from outside the city, puts a great deal of pressure on our road network and infrastructure. And if we don't address this soon, we're not exactly addressing this issue as quickly as I'd like it to be. But anyways, providing mass rapid transit is certainly one of the most effective and also the most expensive ways of relieving this pressure due to people's mobility. And with regards to education and trade, either the education institutes increase their capacity to accommodate in-migration and population growth, or establish a strategy or a program with other regions to help them grow their capacity. So perhaps this involves sending better qualified teachers from cities to rural areas, which I think the Indonesia Mengajar program is doing, sending passionate teachers to rural areas to improve access to education. And healthcare, of course, with the placement of young medical personnel in rural areas. So there's actually a lot of things going on with regards to controlling in-migration and urbanization. Although perhaps it seems that these strategies are remotely connected to controlling urbanization. But if you come to think about it, people do come to cities because of better opportunities in trade, better education facilities, and better healthcare. So I think if we can take care of these three in rural areas, then we can perhaps not block in-migration altogether, but just we can do enough just to minimize its flow and intensity. That's my 2 cents to add to your wonderful presentation. Thank you for the data that you've shared with us. And please, if anyone has any questions or comments regarding urbanization, then yeah, or perhaps is there anyone here who happens to come from a rural background and have moved to a big city in search of better life, or are you all from big cities? I'm born. I was born in Surabaya, raised in Surabaya. Well, spent a good chunk of my childhood elsewhere. But yeah, I think 2/3 of my life has been spent in this city. So I don't really have what they call kampung halaman. My kampung halaman is Surabaya, which in my opinion, Surabaya is a pretty large urban village anyways. So no, everyone comes from big cities and been living in big cities all their lives. Alrighty then. If there are no further comments or questions, then thank you, Nessa. I hope you take some of the additional notes that I've mentioned to help you develop your manuscript further. If that's all, I think if there are no further questions or remarks, then Nessa, you can deliver your closing remarks.
Sorry, sir. I think I got lost.
No, you can deliver your closing remarks. You know, like thank you for listening and so on.
Oh yeah. Okay. Thank you everyone for listening to my presentation today. Sorry if I got any wrong from today's presentation. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much. So allow me to reshare with you the allow me to reshare this with you once again while I say one or two words while I reflect on the case study introductions that we've had over the last 8 or 9 weeks. I can say that I can safely say that I'm pleased with the case study introductions that you have delivered so far. I would like to remind everyone to submit their initial draft, their initial manuscript draft for evaluation in our classroom. I'll go and double check I think hang on, it should be up here. Right, don't forget to submit your first draft. That consists of the case study introduction for me to evaluate. I will evaluate your presentations through our recordings. And other than that, it is now time for you to consider your approaches to the case studies that you've presented. What are your strategies? What would be the most plausible strategy to overcome the issue that you've described, that you've introduced? And then how can you put those strategies into action? So that's what we will be discussing over the next few weeks, over the second half of the semester. And I'd like to remind you as well that we will have the end of semester workshop where you can review each other's works, and therefore, and I will also take your reviews of your friends' works into consideration for the final grades. So you have, in effect, you have a degree of power to determine your classmates' end results. But that is not until the final weeks of class. We might need to readjust our schedule because of public holidays and such. And I will I will come up with a new configuration, I think, of presenters, of presentation schedules as the week progresses. But in the meantime, next week, let's just continue. Let's just continue with the same pattern we did before. So it's urban land management and the strategies to manage urban land management, and the action plan should be presented next week. Before moving back to the similar pecking order or similar presentation order. I think the only adjustment that we need to worry about at the moment is the Eid holidays. But I think that shouldn't take too large of an adjust. That shouldn't make too large of an impact on our semester schedule. Anyway, that is all from me now. Thank you once again to everyone for sharing their wonderful case studies with me and with the class. I look forward to reading your drafts for the next phase, the strategy and action plans to deal with the issues or the themes that you have chosen. So have a great afternoon, everyone, and take very good care of yourselves. I'll see you all again next week. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.